All right. Welcome to another episode of Around the 412 Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm your host, Smitty. With me again this week, joined by my co-host, Donnie Druin.
Hola.
All right, man. This is like the halfway point for us. Week 8, obviously, hopefully you're in a lead where the championship's week 16, because if your championship's in week 17, I highly suggest you getting out of that league. Because you're going to have guys sitting that are very important pieces to your team. And week 17 happens every year. So please, if you are in a league that plays on week 17, get out of that league, join a different league. With that being said, this is like the halfway point due to that. So you're getting a pretty good feel of where your team is. Once again, as we mentioned on here when we did like our first show, you're not going to win or lose your lead at the draft. It's about the moves you make after that. Perfect example, honestly, is my team. In one of my leagues, I started out 0-4. Which normally, man, that puts you in a huge hole.
Yeah,
but
that's like panic button city.
I've won the last 3 games now, and due to the points scored, I'm actually now in a playoff spot with a 6 seed. So, I climbed up out of that hole. And obviously, you could go reverse of that too. You could have started out 3-0, 4-0, and been on a slide since then. But either way, what I'm getting at is, it's a marathon, not a race. So if you had a bad draft, there's ways to adjust the roster in time. But a couple things to mention before we really dive deep into Week 8 prep. Rocking Around the 412 Year 2, it's underway. It's our pinned tweet on Twitter. I talk about it every week on both this show and the regular Around the 412 show. Essentially what we're doing is trying to raise money to purchase kids' Christmas gifts. So it's running right now until probably like 2 weeks before Christmas. Looking for families that are in need, obviously, single-parent homes, families that really just can't afford to give their kids Christmas. Whatever the circumstances are, we really don't care what the circumstances are. It's just about the kids, giving kids who wouldn't have a good Christmas otherwise a good Christmas. So that's the mission this year. Once again, you can go straight to the GoFundMe. It's our pinned tweet on Twitter. It will take you right to the link. Anything that you can donate, obviously, is awesome. But if you donate $20 or more, you have the chance to win some jerseys or Penguin tickets. For donating anything, you have a chance to win one of the items from our merch store, which I have my hat on right now, one of them. So I should have worn the hoodie. The new hoodies that we have are sick. Like I'm being biased here, obviously, but they're called color block hoodies. So it's like gray, but then the sleeves are black, and obviously has our logo right in the middle. I've actually put a picture up of me wearing it before, so. But anyway, so someone was going to win something from our merch store, and then also a $50 Total Sports ENT gift card. And the name Total Sports obviously like makes you think it's just sports, but it's not. So if you're like a movie fan or something like that, they have autographed memorabilia, movie posters. But all like the big thing is sports, so autographed. Hey, Devin Bush, Pittsburgh Steelers. He's a TSE exclusive athlete. So anyway. Yeah, really cool stuff for getting involved in donating. But once again, all the prizes are listed as well. So if you go look at our pinned tweet on Twitter, at Around the 412 on Twitter, it will give you all that information. And what we're doing is the giveaways. So, and then Around the 412, part of the Pod Hub Network, you can find us at podhubnetwork.com along with all our other great shows. And we are sponsored by Keats Barbershop, located at 180 Brighton Avenue in Rochester, PA. Open 10 to 7, Tuesday through Friday, and Saturday 9 to 4. Tuesday's the day to go, though. $5 off for military, first responders, and nurses. Christian himself served in the Army, so it's obviously very important for him to give back in any way that he can, especially to military personnel. So, but with that being said, I think we can finally jump into the fantasy aspect of the fantasy football show.
Yeah, it's probably preferred.
Right. So first couple things to talk about before we do like our regular, top 5, blah, blah, blah. We are introducing a new segment, which I will bring up this should be like the last thing that we do. But we should probably talk about a major injury that happened on Thursday Night Football, pretty much right after we recorded our last episode with Pat Mahomes going down. It seems like he avoided a season-ending injury, which a lot of people thought was a possibility when that happened. It looked pretty bad. If you saw the video of them snapping his kneecap basically back into place. But there was no structural damage, so that was essentially the only thing that happened was his kneecap was dislocated. So they said probably about 3 weeks or so he's going to miss. How do you think that affect? I mean, it's obviously a huge impact on the Chiefs' offense, but like, to what extent do you think that it affects guys like Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelsey, Robinson if you're playing him, or McCole Hardman, and obviously the running backs as well?
I'm not super sure. Obviously, it'll put a cap on the potential ceiling that you guys have on like a week to week basis. I think Tyreek definitely got bailed out last week with that touchdown catch that he had.
Mm-hmm.
Because aside from that, he really didn't do anything. I think he might have finished with like 13 or 14 points, just depending on like what your scoring system is. But Travis Kelsey, I think he might be in the best shape out of everybody in the offense, just because I don't want to call him inexperienced because Matt Moore's been around for a while, but a
Mm-hmm.
quarterback coming into like a newer offense, starting out, he's going to be looking for his tight end as his go-to guy. And what better go-to guy to have than Travis Kelsey? As for the running backs, I think they're kind of suffering the worst out of all of this. Teams are now not going to be afraid to load a box with 7 or 8 guys and kind of basically force Matt Moore to win the Chiefs football games with his arm. And as we saw, on Thursday night, that's not always going to be the best case possible for the Chiefs.
Yeah, and I mean now Matt Moore is being prepared as the starter and everything, and I know Andy Reid was a big fan of him. He actually like coveted him to bring him in to be the backup there, because he thought that he would really be able to thrive in that offense if the opportunity arose. Obviously, unfortunately, arose. But yeah, it's going to be interesting. On the reverse side of that, teams are now going to be game planning for him to be the starter. So yeah, Matt Moore now gets a week to prepare as the starter, and everything. But teams are also now preparing for him as the starter. And like you said, they're probably going to load the box and make him actually win games with his arm. I think Matt Moore is a capable quarterback in the NFL. I mean, I think he's definitely deserving of a job. It's just to be like Andy Reid's creativity on offense is really going to be tested here. And we talked about being obviously one of the best offensive minds in football. His offense, if it can continue, and obviously it's going to take a little bit of a drop off at the very least, obviously going from Pat Mahomes to Matt Moore. But if they are somehow able to sustain and still win games with that offense, I mean, Andy Reid's legacy is just cemented right there.
Definitely, yeah, and this is one situation where you would kind of prefer a backup quarterback to be in, coached by Andy Reid, having the options of Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelsey, Sammy Watkins, and Marcus Robinson, and a pretty decent
I
running
forgot
back
about Sammy
stable there
Watkins.
as well. Yeah, I mean, I feel like he's always hurt, but it's easy
Yeah.
to forget about him.
Mm-hmm.
But no, to my point, I feel like if any quarterback can go into Kansas City and kind of be a game manager like Alex Smith was for such a long time, I feel like it could be Matt Moore himself.
Yeah. And then looking at a couple of trades that happened today involving receivers, that one, I mean, you probably have on most rosters, at least as a bench receiver. The other one probably out there in free agency, Emmanuel Sanders going to San Fran. And then early in the day, waking up to the news, really, that New England acquired Mohamed Sanu for a second-round pick, which, man, a second-round pick for Mohamed Sanu. I know he has the extra year of control. He's not a free agent after this year. And for New England, that's essentially going to be one of the last picks of the second round, if not the last pick of the second round. But, yeah, it seems like an overpay on the surface, but this is a guy they coveted. They tried to trade that same exact pick for him at the draft. So it's going to be interesting to see how these guys are used. What do you think about them from a fantasy perspective?
So basically, from a fantasy perspective, I don't think much is going to change for everybody. It's still going to be the Julian Edelman show up in New England. I was looking at their rostered spots today, actually, for all of the New England receivers. So Edelman, obviously, 99% of leagues, he's on everybody's starting lineup, essentially. Mm-hmm. Next highest is going to be Josh Gordon at 81%. And then it takes a sturdy dip down all the way to 33% for Philip Dorsett. So Dorsett and Edelman both are able to average about 10 points a game. Well, actually over 10 points a game, actually. Josh Gordon averages, I believe, 9.6 as well. So if you're looking for that double-digit scoring consistency, you're going to get it in New England. Matt Ryan has thrown the ball 12 more times than Tom Brady throughout the entire season. But whenever you take a step back and you look at it, it really doesn't feel like that. Because whenever you think of Atlanta, you think of Matt Ryan, you think of Ryan throwing for 300 yards every game. Think of this like high-scoring offense in Atlanta that the Falcons usually have. And then you take a look at the New England perspective, then it's this, hey, we have Sony Michel, we have all these other running backs. We're going to run the football, and then we're going to run the shut up the pass. But like I pointed out, Brady's thrown the ball 12 less times than Matt Ryan, so there's certainly some offensive production that can happen with Sanu in New England. My only problem is that he's not going to be the guy in New England, just like he wasn't the guy in Atlanta. So I'm not sure if people are expecting Sanu to like skyrocket to like wide receiver one status or not. I just don't see that happening with him in the Patriots uniform.
Yeah, I mean, the only reason I'm giving him a little bit of an uptick going from Atlanta to New England is just because of how much New England obviously coveted the guy. I think that they're going to find a way to get him the ball. I mean, like I said, they were trying to get him for a second-round pick, that same exact pick, before the draft this past year. So they obviously wanted him. They had have a plan for him, I would think. And really, a lot of people are starting to think maybe Josh Gordon's injury is more serious. So that's obviously something to monitor as well, and I think he would receive a slight uptick there. But you mentioned the name Philip Dorsett. That was actually a guy that I had as my waiver wire receiver last week, and he caught a touchdown last night. Yeah, I mean, owned in 33% of the leagues, like you said. We saw firsthand what he did against the Steelers. That guy's a former first-round pick. So, I mean, the upside is definitely there with him as well. It's really going to be Julian Edelman, and then I think it's going to be too hard to predict on a week-to-week basis. I think you could do a lot worse than picking up a guy like Mohamed Sanu and playing the waiting game and maybe seeing a week or two, and then maybe he's like a flex option. I don't see him as a wide receiver 1 or 2. I think Julian Edelman, like I said, is the only guy there that you can really rely on week to week to have in your lineup as far as pass catchers.
Yeah, and that's the thing. If you even want to look at just Sanu himself, he's on about 50% of ESPN leagues. He scored 1 touchdown this year. He's at the crack 20 fantasy points in a single game. So it's not like the Patriots are getting some golden ticket to the Super Bowl, with or without, Sanu. But like I said, as much as I'm going to sit here and not criticize Sanu, but kind of, back off and wanting to put the crown on him, the Pats spent a second-round pick on him, which is more so like an early third-round pick, but, still a second. They obviously coveted him, and I feel like if they went out and they were able to get the capital and, kind of swap it for him, send it to Atlanta, I feel like they're going to use him. So we'll see.
Right. Yeah, and then the other guy that I mentioned, Emmanuel Sanders, going from Denver to San Francisco. Joe Flacco has been terrible in Denver, especially in their last game, trying to get him the ball. I am not necessarily. We were talking about it, though, with somebody that reached out to us asking about Emmanuel Sanders. I think that there's too many mouths to feed, as we both mentioned, and that passing game goes through George Kittle first, and then it's kind of everybody else. And on a week-to-week basis, you wonder, am I going to get consistent production from anybody? They also like to use their running backs, both running the ball, they're a run-heavy team, and out of the backfield catching passes. Jimmy Garoppolo doesn't really throw the ball a lot. So you really wonder, Emmanuel Sanders is a good get for them. I think he's going to be a really good football player. But as far as fantasy value, I'm not sure that I trust him really any more than his situation in Denver.
Yeah, so I'm going to completely agree with you there. I think is just as far as a alpha receiver being on a team, there's no better team to go to than San Francisco. Man, I can't talk. So not a single receiver on the 49ers is rostered over 30% in the ESPN leagues, and not a single one is starting at over 4% of leagues. So that kind of tells you, and like you pointed out, the 49ers love to run the football. Second most rushing attempts in the NFL, and very bottom in terms of passing attempts as well. So you were spot on about Jimmy G not throwing the football at all. He throws it less than any other quarterback in the NFL. Granted, they're not going to be running the ball every play, but there is going to be a cap in terms of what Sanders can do just because of the game flow and the play calling whenever it comes to the 49ers. So unless there's a really big change of heart in San Francisco, I just don't see Sanders putting up these great big numbers, and that's the problem. He's a volume guy. I'm just looking at his numbers right there. He's scored, I think, 2 touchdowns on the year so far. And all of his big point performances have come with him getting, 9, 10, 11 targets and him scoring touchdowns. So I just don't think that's going to happen in San Francisco, barring Kyle Shanahan just revamping everything in the middle of the season.
Which, doesn't make sense. They're one of 2 undefeated teams left in football. They're not just going to scrap everything that they did to cater it to a pending free agent wide receiver. I think that they were just that desperate at the position. And like I said, Emmanuel Sanders is a good football player. From a fantasy perspective, I don't think that you're going to get the production out of him that you're expecting going from a team like the Broncos to a team like the 49ers. Because on the surface, that sounds like an ideal scenario. But from a fantasy perspective, I don't think that it necessarily is. Because at least in Denver, They were trying to throw the ball. They're trailing all the time, so the passing attempts are going to be there. In San Fran, they're going to get up early and pound the ball into the ground. So,
right, yeah, San Francisco, they like to use those double tight end sets to like to run the football down your mouth. And if you want to take a step back and look at, hey, Emmanuel Sanders is now the guy in San Francisco. Let's go out and get him. Cool, sure. It's always nice to have the number one receiver on a fantasy team. But whenever that team that he plays on runs the ball almost more than anybody else in the league and throws the ball less than literally everybody else in the league, you're kind of capping yourself at that point. So
yeah, and you could say that he's their wide receiver one, but the guy who plays tight end there is like their wide receiver one. So at best, Emmanuel Sanders is still going to be the second option in the passing game for a team that doesn't throw the ball.
Completely agree.
Okay, so jumping to our top fives at each position. We do this every week. Typically, we're about half wrong, half right, if I'm keeping track correctly. So I want to apologize for everybody that started Kyler Murray last week. Sorry about that. Once again, I mentioned on here how much I was actually intrigued by that game from an offensive standpoint, and it didn't come to fruition whatsoever.
No, it did. Both teams scored over 24 points, I believe.
For Kyler Murray and Daniel Jones, it didn't come to fruition.
Yeah, it just didn't come to fruition for anybody fantasy relevant at all.
Yeah. And David Johnson, who was active, wasn't active.
Yep.
But I'll actually touch on that later. So look at top 5 quarterback plays for this week. A lot of common names and one surprise maybe. Deshaun Watson going against Oakland is my QB1 for the week. Really, I don't have much reasoning behind it other than it's Deshaun Watson going against Oakland, and I think that's all I really need to say.
Yep.
Russ Wilson goes against Atlanta. Russ Wilson actually had his worst game of the season, by far, against Baltimore through his first interception, his return for 6. He just didn't look good, and obviously, you could say weather played into that because it was pretty bad conditions in Seattle, but it's typically rainy in Seattle. I mean, Russell Wilson is used to those conditions all the time. But I think he bounces back here against a bad Atlanta team. And they're playing in Atlanta as well, so that they're playing in a dome. The one worry for me there is Matt Ryan probably not going to play, so Seattle could get up very early and then really go to the ground with Chris Carson. But I think Russell Wilson's going to do enough in this game to warrant that QB2 play. Another guy, this guy could be playing in bad conditions. As of right now, it is showing rain, but Tom Brady going against Cleveland. The thing here is, what we've seen the last couple weeks is Tom Brady really not doing much from a fantasy perspective. Sony Michel is just a touchdown monster there right now. Tom Brady only threw 1 touchdown last night, obviously, like I mentioned to Philip Dorsett. But I love this matchup with Cleveland. Cleveland, I'm not sure what the case is right now with either their starting cornerbacks, if they're getting either one back or both. But either way, this is a mouth-watering matchup with a secondary that's been pretty bad, mainly in part due to not having Greedy Williams or Denzel Ward. So, but we'll see. Love the matchup, though, on paper at least. Aaron Rodgers going against Kansas City. Aaron Rodgers, easily his best game. Is that the best game from a fantasy quarterback so far this year? Aaron Rodgers this past week, 6 touchdowns, 5 throwing and 1 on the ground. He gets KC here, which, once again, obviously, KC is one of the better teams in the league, especially when they have Pat Mahomes. But if you look at their secondary, there's still a lot of question marks there. And Tyrann Mathieu really hasn't done anything to shore those questions up. And then my number 5 quarterback, which I said could surprise some people, but if you look at his numbers over the last couple weeks, they've been better than anybody. To give you a little bit of a hint here, maybe, his wide receivers called him out, and all of a sudden he's been lights out. I'm going Kirk Cousins, Thursday Night Football against Washington, his old team. So he gets, obviously, to play against his old team. They are terrible. Kirk Cousins has been red hot. It sounds like he's not going to have Adam Thielen, but I still love it as a quarterback 5 play. So there it is.
Yeah, so there's a lot of similar names in our top 5. I actually have Russell Wilson number 1 going against Atlanta. Atlanta's defense is in shreds right now. Russell Wilson is in the MVP conversation for a very good reason. That's because he's one of the best quarterbacks in the league. So I'll always take that matchup. Weather's not going to be in factor. They're going to be indoors. So I definitely think Wilson is a top 5 lock for this week. I have Aaron Rodgers number 2 against the Kansas City Chiefs defense. Sure, Mahomes is there to kind of keep up the tempo and what could have been a really fun shootout to watch. Yeah. But the Chiefs defense is still bad enough for me to kind of temper expectations for Aaron Rodgers. I don't expect him to go out and score 6 more touchdowns again next week, but I definitely feel like he can have another big performance underneath his belt. Deshaun Watson is my QB3 against the Oakland Raiders. Like you said, it's Deshaun Watson against the Oakland Raiders. I feel like that's really all the reasoning you need.
Yeah.
I feel like Deshaun Watson, anytime he goes up against a defense kind of that lackluster, and not to any fault of their own, but, the defense just traded away Garyon Conley, one of their better cornerbacks, and I think DeAndre Hopkins, is going to have himself a field day. I actually have Jared Goff QB4 going against the Bengals. Jared Goff has been putting up decent quarterback numbers the last couple of weeks. The Bengals have one of the worst defenses in the NFL, and I believe the worst pass defense in the NFL, if I'm not mistaken. So really got to like that matchup over there. And then I'm sticking with my boy, Kyler Murray, QB5 against the New Orleans Saints. I'm going to attribute the bad game he had last week to weather. Before then, Kyler Murray was one of 3 quarterbacks to score more than 16 points for every week before that whole debacle in New York happened. I like him rebounding against the Saints defense where, they look really good on paper. They're tough for sure, but their weaknesses can be exploited. And so hopefully Kyler can do that.
Okay, I like it. Going right back to Kyler Murray. Going right back to the well.
We got faith. And now we'll probably know whether or not David Johnson's playing this time around. So,
right. Yeah, man. So many people had to have been burned by that.
And I can't imagine how pissed I'd be. I'm going to be really honest. I'd be really pissed off.
And you got to figure most people have Edmonds on their, like a lot of people probably had Edmonds on their bench with Johnson starting, in case he wasn't active, ready to plug him in.
Right. Well, people want to point to David Johnson. I don't know if you heard this, but apparently Cliff Kingsbury on Friday said that Johnson was only going to play unless they really needed him, and that he was still deemed as active though. But as a fantasy player, if David Johnson's active, you're not going to sit him.
Yeah.
That would be the dumbest thing ever to do.
Agreed. I mean, yeah, you see, I had him as a top 5 play last week. Once again, going back to 50% right, 50% wrong. That I was way wrong with that one. Pretty much Arizona's offense. That game in general, because Evan Ingram had a dud as well. But Anyway, yeah, just if you had David Johnson, I feel bad for you last week because Edmonds had the day that a healthy David Johnson very well could have had. Okay, so moving on to the running backs. My top 2 might be the same every week. Saquon going against Detroit is my number 1. And that's all I have to say on it. I said but I had nothing else to say there. If you have Saquon Barkley, congrats. My number 2, and I actually have both these guys in the same league as well, Dalvin Cook going against Washington. I think Minnesota's offense has a field day. I mentioned Kirk Cousins a top 5 play for me, but also Adam Thielen, as I already mentioned, isn't playing. So I still think, even if he was, Minnesota has still been run heavy for a good portion of the year. They've gone to the passing game a little bit more as Kirk Cousins has obviously been caught up by his receivers and elevated his play. They've been more comfortable doing that. But Dalvin Cook has still been putting up huge numbers. Another great 2-touchdown performance on Sunday. So Dalvin Cook going against Washington, I don't know how anybody would have him outside their top 5, but for me, he's a top 2 play. This one might surprise some people because I haven't had him in the top 5 yet. Pittsburgh's very own James Conner going against Miami. I know a lot of people actually have Juju as a top 5 receiver play this week, which I don't get at all. I mean, the production just hasn't been there for me to warrant that. But I actually think James Conner's the guy here that has another huge day, coming off a big game on Sunday Night Football. I know that he did miss some time with injury or whatever in that game. Benny Snell obviously took over, and there was some concern, but he hasn't been limited at all this week in practice. There's really not much question about him playing on Monday Night Football against the Dolphins, and I think that he's the biggest beneficiary here against a really bad Miami team all around, but especially on defense. And I think James Conner has a field day. Christian McCaffrey going against San Fran. This is actually not a very good matchup, but it's Christian McCaffrey, so I think he warrants being a top 5 play every week. You could argue that he is the one running back that's in MVP consideration right now with what Carolina has done without Cam Newton. Even though Kyle Allen's actually been pretty good, and he's been named the starter already for Sunday. But yeah, I mean, I love Christian McCaffrey, and once again, I just think if he's playing, regardless of who, if it could be the worst possible matchup. I don't know what San Fran is holding running backs to. I know is it the second least or least amount of fantasy points per game that they're holding running backs to. But Christian McCaffrey, he does too much. He's a gadget player, and I think he's going to be a top 5 player every week. In my last one, excuse me, going back to that Seattle-Atlanta game, going with Chris Carson here. So his first 3 weeks, he lost 3 fumbles and didn't have a single 100-yard game in those 3 games. Since then, he's averaging over 100 yards, and I think he scored 4 touchdowns in those 3 weeks. Either way, once again, playing in a dome, I think Seattle's offense has a really good day here, both through the air and on the ground, and Chris Carson is my running back 5.
Super solid list. I can't complain about that. Really good reasoning for everybody. I actually have Christian McCaffrey as my RB1 going through this week. Yeah, it's a really tough matchup against the Niners defense, who's undefeated. But I don't think they've seen a player quite like Christian McCaffrey. I don't expect the Panthers to walk into San Francisco and come out with a win, but I do expect Christian McCaffrey to get the touches both on the ground and through the air. So at bare minimum, I think Christian McCaffrey has a decent to Christian McCaffrey-esque game. Number 2,
I don't mean to cut you off, but I wanted to bring this up actually. Now that you brought up Christian McCaffrey again, it reminded me. He's not a guy that's going to be affected by that game script. So even if the Niners get up early, like you mentioned, he catches passes for them too. I mean, he's one of their top 2 receivers. So if the Niners go up early, Christian McCaffrey isn't going to be isolated out of that game. He's still going to be catching the ball in the backfield for them.
Yeah, I think that's one of the benefits about owning him is that, regardless of whether or not Carolina is up 21-0 or down 21-0, okay, cool. Feed Christian McCaffrey. It works both ways. So I think that's a really good benefit of having him. So RB2 is actually going to be Leonard Fournette versus the New York Jets. Fournette has been killing it as of late, and the Jets have not been killing it as of late, to put it nicely.
They're seeing this.
Yeah, definitely. So Fournette gets the workload every week that I like. There's no other running back in that backfield to compete for touches. He's starting to catch the ball a little bit more as well, which I really like for his value. As long as Fournette's healthy, I think he's going to be a top 5 to top 7 fringe player, just depending on the matchups that week. Saquon Barkley versus Detroit. I'm a little bit worried about him coming back from injury. I feel like he's going to get obviously a little bit more healthy this week with more rest, but I'm just really timid on Barkley right now. But still, for me, a top 3 player in fantasy football. If he's active, you put him in regardless of what happens. I have James Conner, number 4, against the Miami Dolphins. I feel like a game script should dictate James Conner getting the football a lot. Whether it be on the ground or through the air. I feel like Conner has the chance for a really big bounce-back game and kind of a chance to reestablish himself as Pittsburgh's RB1 after a little bit of question marks, honestly, between him and, Jalen Samuels, who's currently out with an injury, and Benny Snell, who had a decent run a couple weeks ago. But no, James Conner, I like him a lot this week. And then Dalvin Cook, like you said, you got to have him in your top 5. He's my top 5. Running back, going to get at number 5 against the Redskins on Thursday Night Football. I'm not a big fan of playing people on Thursday night. I just feel like it always comes back to bite me in the ass. But still, regardless, Dalvin Cook has been a monster this year. I've actually heard his name come up in the MVP conversation this year as well, ahead of Christian McCaffrey, just because of the monster numbers he's been putting up. But yeah, Dalvin Cook, number 5. Short weeks, so that might benefit him with, the defense having less time to game plan, so we'll see.
Yeah, you brought up about James Conner. Yeah, when Jalen Samuels was healthy, there were Steeler fans around week 3, week 4. This team was 0-3, and obviously that costly fumble against the Niners, where the Niners probably wouldn't be undefeated if that fumble doesn't occur from James Conner, that were clamoring for Jalen Samuels to kind of take over the backfield. James Conner has had, over the last 2 seasons, some big-time fumbles. Not that it's like, you're not looking at the number of fumbles because it's not that high, but just like when they happen in the game, they've been very critical. Yeah. And that leaves a bad taste in people's mouth. If he fumbles that ball in the first quarter, no one's even really thinking about it. But because of when it happened, people are like, oh, yeah, we need to feed Jalen Samuels. Benny Snell needs to get a look. Yeah, people were kind of overreacting. I got to give James Conner so much credit, though, because coming out of college, he was not a receiving back. I mean, and the way that he's just completely transformed his game after the departure of Le'Veon, yeah, it's been fun to watch. Like I said, in that game against the Chargers, he was the only person that caught more than 2 passes.
Yeah, would he catch 7 from Devlin?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now, I mean, that's the thing is it's a different quarterback going against Miami than it was against the Chargers, so you might not see as many dump offs. But I think that the Steelers could probably look at that game a little bit and see maybe this is the way that we need to run our offense, even with Mason there. But, man, I still want to see him sling it.
Yeah, and hopefully Fichtner allows him to do that. We've seen Fichtner kind of coddle his quarterbacks, less and less as the depth chart goes down, actually. With Ben, we didn't see a whole lot of pushing the ball downfield. With Mason, we've seen a little bit more. But definitely gets in the game, and all of a sudden the playbook opens up. So that's a conversation for another day, but kind of ridiculous.
Okay, so moving on to wide receivers. I feel like there's a couple new names that I haven't put in my top 5 yet. But at the top, it's still pretty much the same. I got DeAndre Hopkins going against Oakland. I have Deshaun Watson as my quarterback 1. Slotting in right in there as a wide receiver number 1 for me is Hopkins. I think those two have a field day together. The injury to Will Fuller, obviously, he's gonna miss some time. Copy and paste that every single year, but he's gonna miss significant time. It looks like with a hamstring injury. And DeAndre Hopkins, really no competition in terms of. I mean, they have maybe a decent complementary receiver, and I'll actually talk about him later. But DeAndre Hopkins is my wide receiver 1 in Oakland. Going against Oakland. Michael Thomas, my wide receiver 2, going against Arizona. He's a target monster. Once again, as we mentioned when Breeze went down, this is a guy you really don't have to worry about. The volume's always going to be there. He doesn't drop any passes. No one can guard him. Michael Thomas, doesn't matter who he's playing against, because he could see a lot of Patrick Peterson. But I love him going against Arizona. Tyler Lockett, in that same game that I've mentioned already at both positions I've already talked about, going against Atlanta in the Dome. This season has been like a Tyler Lockett coming out party, and I think it continues going against Atlanta. We've already mentioned that defense, and it actually could look even more different by the time that they play, because they're selling right now. They're looking to move Vic Beasley, some other guys on that team, and that could make that defense even worse by the time that they play, so we'll see. We mentioned that we're not big on playing guys on Thursday Night Football, but here we are, and I'm talking about Stephon Diggs, wide receiver 4 for me. The reason mainly being Adam Thielen's out. Stephon Diggs has had a couple weeks now where he's had pretty good performances after pretty much doing nothing for the first 4 or 5 weeks of the season. So I like him here going against the Redskins. I hope that he sees a lot of Josh Norman because he's been terrible. But it'll be interesting to see how they match up. My wide receiver 5, and this could very well come back to bite me based off what this offense has done recently, but I'm sticking to it because I believe in this guy so much. Chris Godwin going against Tennessee. I struggled here because I wanted to put Cooper Kupp right back in this position, but the last couple weeks it just hasn't been there. And I think Chris Godwin has a decent chance to bounce back. I'm curious to see how these cornerbacks and the secondary in general match up with these receivers. Because as bad as this offense has been, it's still Chris Godwin, it's still Mike Evans. Just Jameis Winston, please figure out a way to make it work.
You let me know when Jameis gets back to you on that. So we actually have 4 out of 5 receivers together, almost in the same order. We actually have the same top 3. I have Hopkins, Thomas, and Lockett as my 1, 2, 3. Bang, bang, bang.
Nice.
Yep.
I saw your reaction to my wide receiver 3, and I was like, okay.
So we have Godwin, number 4 for me, going against the Tennessee Titans. Coming off a bye week, I feel like the Titans are really going to try to focus on Mike Evans, and Chris Godwin obviously has been the benefactor of that through 2019. He's having a monster year, and I just I expect to see that continue. Number 5, I have Cortland Sutton versus the Indianapolis Colts. Emmanuel Sanders leaving means that Cortland Sutton is now the guy in Denver. He was already putting up pretty decent numbers with Emmanuel Sanders there. I feel like now the passing game is going to flow to Cortland Sutton, and we'll see what he can do. Is this going to be? I don't want to compare his case to a guy like Juju at all, just because Juju is a very talented receiver and he can get the job done. Without a secondary alpha receiver, but we'll see what Cortland Sutton is made of, and I feel like he's going to get a little bit more targets, and that should increase his numbers a bit. So, Cortland Sutton, wide receiver 5 this week.
I like that. I'm a big fan of Cortland Sutton. I was a big fan of him coming out. You really wonder what he could be with better quarterback play there, and maybe Flacco really keys on him. And from a volume standpoint, you think it's going to be there. It's just a matter of if they can make it work. He's going to get the ball thrown to him.
Yeah, he definitely will. I've seen games where he's been targeted 9 or 10 times, and it's happened multiple times this year, I believe. So the sky's the limit for him, and now there's not an Emmanuel Sanders to block him.
So who does that make the wide receiver 2 in Denver? Deshaun Hamilton?
I would assume so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Deshaun.
Okay, so moving to tight ends. This is a position where I feel like for the most part it's just copy and paste it each week. I do have one name here that enters that, there was probably 3 guys that I thought about putting here. George Kittle going against Carolina is my number 1. From a volume standpoint, it's going to be there every single week. He actually has gotten a rushing attempt for some reason in like 3 of their games this year. Not that
Really?
It's gone for like very big, but just an interesting note there as well that he's added rushing yards in 3 of their 7 games. But yeah, I'm a big fan of Kittle. Obviously, I own him in a fantasy league, which has been huge for me. It's basically like having a receiver. So going against Carolina, not necessarily the greatest matchup, but I mean, we talked about the top 3 tight ends at the beginning of the year. Being Kelsey, Kittle, Ertz. And really, Kittle's the only one that I think on a week-to-week basis has done it. And, Kelsey now, obviously not having Mahomes, it's going to be interesting to see. As you mentioned, the tight end is going to be a security blanket, which is why I have Kelsey as my number 2, even with Matt Moore being the quarterback. It's going to be interesting to see. I might be taking a gamble here saying he's tight end 2 with a backup quarterback. But, as you mentioned, that's the security blanket. If Matt Moore, isn't able to find somebody else, guess where the ball's going to be going? It's going to be going to Travis Kelce. If you're trying to simplify things, where's the ball to be going? It's going to be going to Travis Kelce. Tight end 3, Austin Hooper going against Seattle. Seattle's actually been pretty bad against tight ends this year. And Austin Hooper has been putting up monster numbers. His name has actually been popping up on the trade block, so hopefully he's not traded before this game at least, because this would be irrelevant. But, yeah, Austin Hooper, very talented dude, and it's just finally nice to see it coming out part of this year. I haven't really seen him talked about as far as like a top tight end, at least in terms of like national media attention. But this dude's been putting up as good a numbers as anybody at the position on a week-to-week basis. So, once again, a guy that now probably doesn't have a starting quarterback, but Matt Schaub could rely on him, dink and dunk, going underneath. Once again, just being a security blanket for him. So, Evan Ingram going against Detroit. The dude laid a dud this past week against the team that gives up the most points to tight ends. But I think he bounces back here against Detroit. Another pretty solid matchup here. I just hope that him and Daniel Jones get on the same page. Evan Ingram, the first game that Daniel Jones played actually had a pretty good game. But to this point, Evan Ingram hasn't had like a monster game with Daniel Jones. I think it could happen here. And my tight end 5, for the reason I just mentioned about Arizona giving up the most points to tight ends, I want Jared Cook here, which might be going off the map a little bit. You talk about guys like Zach Ertz that are normally in the conversation, but he really hasn't gotten it done. Hunter Henry was a guy that I considered here, but I go with Jared Cook, who scored a touchdown in each of their last 2 games, going against an Arizona team that's given up the most points to tight ends this year.
No, not a bad pick at all. And kind of foreshadow, I also have Jared Cook as my tight end 5 going against the Cardinals as well.
Nice.
I feel like I said last week, just take whoever is playing the Cardinals and kind of plug that tight end in, and he should see some pretty decent success. Tight end 1, George Kittle. Like I said, the volume is always going to be there. He has talk the talk and walk the walk as far as putting up numbers and gone. Travis Kelce and Zach Ertz can't really say the same. So tight end 2 is actually going to be Hunter Henry for me. Going against the Chicago Bears is a little bit of a tough matchup, but Hunter Henry looks like he is fully healthy now. Phillip Rivers loves a fully healthy tight end, and I just got to roll the dice with that. Evan Ingram is my tight end 3. Like you said, he hasn't really had that big pop-off game yet. The arrival of Golden Tate kind of takes away some targets for him as well. Golden Tate's has some pretty decent fantasy days. We'll see. He's still in athletic mismatch at the tight end position. Detroit's defense is good, but not phenomenal. So, I feel like Darius Slay is going to be locking up Golden Tate. I feel like the Lions are going to be forced to try to put a linebacker on Evan Ingram. Hopefully that'll create some mismatches. Saquon Barkley might be the guy running rampant and, probably still in Detroit, but Evan Ingram's still probably a guy who's going to get the targets he gets on a week-to-week basis. I have Jared Cook as my tight end 5, like I mentioned before. It's just New Orleans offense is playing phenomenal right now without Drew Brees, minus Alvin Kamara, actually. But Teddy Bridgewater, he doesn't like to sling the ball past 25 yards downfield. It's usually where tight ends hang out, minus 25 yards downfield. Jared Cook kind of touchdown dependent. But if you're looking for big tight ends like make a splash in week 5, I feel like Jared Cook is in the top 5.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I mentioned he scored a touchdown each of the last couple of weeks, so there's probably not a better opportunity for him to score a touchdown than against the team that's given up the most points to the tight end position. So,
right.
I mean, and he's not even owned in a ton of leagues. So, if he's out there, that would be my guy to plug and play this week at that position.
Completely agree.
Okay, so waiver wire ads. Happy to be doing an episode where this is actually relevant. Because, last week we weren't able to get it. We did it on Thursday, so kind of like waiver wire Wednesday was already over. In the last couple weeks before that, I wasn't here. So, happy to be doing it now before waiver wire Wednesday. At the quarterback position, we've touched on this guy, mainly you. Still owned in less than 50% of the leagues. Jacoby Brissett going against Denver. He's owned in 48% of Yahoo leagues. So, Jacoby Brissett had a monster game this past week. Actually scored 34.64 fantasy points. Denver's defense, not necessarily the greatest matchup for quarterbacks, but hey, who knows? Chris Harris could be traded by the time that this game happens. So, we'll see. Either way, that would be my guy to add on the waiver wire. Honestly, I kind of toyed with the idea of saying Mason Rudolph here. He's only owned in 7% of Yahoo leagues, and they're playing obviously against the Dolphins, so I think you could throw a worse dart than that one. But Jacoby Brissett's just been pretty much going over his projection every single week. So, going against Denver, if you need a quarterback, that would be my guy. At the running back position, I mean, we'll see what happens as far as David Johnson's health. But Chase Edmonds is owned in less than 50% of the leagues. After the game he just had, I don't think that you can completely take him out of the game plan. I think you got to find a way to get him some touches on a week-to-week basis. We'll see what they decide to do, but like I said, I just don't see a way that Cliff Kingsbury watches that game and then says, yeah, David Johnson's still going to take every touch in the backfield. Chase Edmonds could help preserve David Johnson as well. I mean, the guy's had health issues the last few seasons. So, Chase Edmonds owned in 49% of Yahoo leagues. They go against New Orleans this week. I think that there's fantasy value there. If you need to throw a dart for a flex play, even with David Johnson being out there. Wide receiver, and this is where I mentioned, okay, so Houston has DeAndre Hopkins, obviously, and Will Fuller went down with a hamstring injury. He's going to miss some time. Kenny Stills is an interesting name here to me. Deep play threat. I think he could get behind Oakland and burn him. I'm going to go as far as saying he scores a touchdown this week. He's owned in 14% of Yahoo leagues, so he's probably available in your league. I'm not saying he's going to have a massive game in terms of receptions or anything like that. I think DeAndre Hopkins really has a field day, but I think that Kenny Stills will score a touchdown on Sunday. So 14% of Yahoo leagues, if you're really desperate for a receiver, if you play 3 receivers plus a flex or something like that, I think that you could do way worse than Kenny Stills going against Oakland, mainly due to the injury with Will Fuller. And then at the tight end position, we already talked about him being tight end number 5, so obviously that's about as good as you're going to do on the waiver wire. And then just 57% of Yahoo leagues, Jared Cook going against Arizona. So Teddy Bridgewater, as you mentioned, the ball's not going down the field. He's not pushing it down the field for 25-plus yards. Jared Cook will be hanging out in the middle of the field. He's also a great red zone threat. Great chance to score another touchdown on Sunday. So Jared Cook is our tight end 5 and also owned in just 57% of Yahoo leagues.
Yeah, I tinkered with Jared Cook as my waiver wire ad as well. I think he was on in about the same 57% of leagues in the ESPN, but it kind of went and chose another direction. And so I'll work some quarterback on. So Teddy Bridgewater is my top waiver ad, available in 21.5% of ESPN leagues. The Saints have been moving the ball terrifically. It hasn't been all Teddy Bridgewater's arm. I'm looking at his point totals right now. He scored anywhere between 16 to about like 23 points per game. So I feel like if you're kind of digging through the waiver wire, there's a lot worse you could do when it comes to the quarterback position. Jacoby Brissett, another great one. Like you had mentioned, he's been my guy, and I feel like he kind of proves himself right every week, and it looks like more people are starting to pick up on that. My running back is also Chase Edmonds as well. Ty Johnson is actually another interesting ad. If we want to talk about Kerryon Johnson being put on IR, probably an hour before we started recording.
I saw you started. I didn't know you got put on IR.
Yeah, the Lions put him on IR today. Yeah,
right,
so that opens up a really big hole in the Lions backfield. A lot of people expect Ty Johnson to take over, because kind of assuming that's what he did whenever Kerryon Johnson, was feeling the effects of him being hurt. But some people expect the Lions to go out and get additional RB help from free agency, so we'll see. But Ty Johnson is probably the most popular waiver wire ad right now. If it weren't for Chase Edmonds, Edmonds produces regardless of whether or not David Johnson is healthy or not. And I think that's something you really got to like. So go and grab Edmonds now while you can, because it does look like Edmonds is going to be part of this offense moving forward, much like people expected Jalen Samuels to be part of the Steelers offense before he gotten hurt.
Right.
My receiver is going to be Corey Davis, 44% available, rostered in ESPN leagues. He's been booming the last couple of weeks. He's had some really strong performances. It looks like the quarterback change helped the Tennessee Titans. It's kind of fluctuating from Mariota to Tannehill. It's been all about opportunity for Corey Davis. It just all depends on who's throwing him the football. As long as he has a somewhat competent quarterback that can throw the ball up and let him run underneath and catch it, he'll produce. He's the established number one receiver on that team. A.J. Brown is doing very well, so it's starting to take some attention away from Corey Davis, leaving him with some one-on-one matchups. Davis has been putting up a lot of numbers, and actually Matthew Berry of ESPN today said that if he had to pick one receiver off the waiver wire, it would be Corey Davis. So, take that for whatever you value his weight in gold in. And then my tight end is going to be Kyle Rudolph, owned in 18% of ESPN leagues. Thursday Night Football, like I said, I'm not too big of a fan, but Adam Thielen is hurt, and Kyle Rudolph benefited greatly from that last week. So I'm just kind of, throwing a dart and seeing if that'll land for 2 weeks in a row for production without Thielen there.
Yeah, we didn't touch on it, but yeah, Tennessee made the quarterback change from Mariota to Tannehill, and that benefited Corey Davis, at least for last week, and we'll see if that's maybe a relationship that is beneficial going forward for Corey Davis, where he can actually, that first-round talent comes to fruition.
Right, yeah, the physical tools are there for him. He's got to put it together.
Right. Okay, so studs and duds of last week, and I feel like a lot of the names that we've already mentioned you'll see pop up here again. Jacoby Brissett scored 34.64 points, well over what he was projected, which he seems to be doing pretty much every week. So I think that they need to adjust that on Yahoo and just start projecting him for more. Chase Edmonds, if you had to play him, even with David Johnson being active, you weren't expecting what you got from him. What you got from him was 35 points, 3 touchdowns. Once again, that was a prime matchup for whatever running back was going to play. David Johnson was listed as active, so everyone was putting him in their lineups and sitting Edmonds, and that just came back to bite them. But if you did start Edmonds, the reward was through the roof. So the wide receiver position, I feel like it would have been really easy to just say Marvin Jones Jr., but he was projected more points than this guy. He scored well over this guy, but he was also projected well over this guy. Zach Pascal, the wide receiver for the Colts, scored 2 touchdowns, 28.6 points. He was not on a roster. If you, for some reason, played him, you were on a DFS site messing around and you were a Colts fan. So, yeah, and then at tight end, really no other way I could go when I looked at the points scored at that position this past week, other than Darren Waller scoring 31.6. That was pretty much double any other tight end, so it was a pretty easy selection there.
Yeah, I feel like Waller's been kind of underrated whenever it comes to tight ends.
You don't see, too.
You don't see him a whole bunch, in the top tight end talk, but he's been producing better than the likes of a Zach Ertz or a Travis Kelce this year.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. So you actually stole a couple of mine. My biggest one I circled was Marvin Jones, the 43 points, 4 touchdowns against Xavier Rhodes, considered to be one of the better cornerbacks in the National Football League. So that was definitely surprising for me. Chase Edmonds as well, 34 points. Man, if I can't imagine the thrill of kind of starting him maybe on accident, maybe by mistake, and then just throwing him in the lineup, kind of seeing what happens. So definitely a dart throw there. Quarterbacks, I'm trying to think of a stupendous one. I mean, you expect big games out of Aaron Rodgers. You expect big games out of Matthew Stafford number wise. But I'll go ahead and go Kirk Cousins.
Yep.
He's really been stringing strong performances. Again, he had about a 30-point game last week, and it really looks like since his receivers have opened up his mouth, he's taken to it. He's starting to get them the ball more, and Minnesota looks like the team they finally could start to be going forward. Tight end, definitely not Evan Ingram. I guess you got to go Darren Waller. That's really the only tight end that had a super strong performance last week.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. So when I was picking, going through here, I was like, wow, the tight end position is like 31 points. Nobody else scored 20 at that position. So how could you really say anybody else? Okay, so duds. Kyler Murray, who had 4.96 points. I would have argued that he would have added 4 or 5 points on the ground going into last week. But he had 4.96 total points against the Giants. Just disappointing. I mean, I think most people probably had him in their lineup for that game. If you didn't, I don't know who your other quarterback was, but that was about as good of a matchup as you could ask for. And he just didn't deliver. Running back, maybe I shouldn't expect much from this guy just because of the way that they game plan, but David Montgomery had 2 carries. He had 1.9 fantasy points. Matt Nagy said today regarding not really running the ball and the way that the offense has been going is they'll figure it out. I'm not an idiot. So,
what's funny is that on I think it was Sunday or Monday, he was like, "I'm aware we need to run the ball more."
Yeah.
Fucking do it. Crazy,
yeah. I don't get it. He shows flashes when you let him touch the ball, and then you just don't let him touch the ball. At wide receiver, I could have gone a couple different directions, but I was just expecting more from this guy. Most people probably have him in their lineup as their wide receiver 2. Kenny Golladay had 3.1 fantasy points. So that's my wide receiver dud for the week. And then at tight end, I think everybody knows what I'm going to say here. Evan Ingram had 1.6 points. He was pretty much a locked-in top 3 play last week with the matchup he had. So, not much more to say there.
Yeah, so my quarterback was Kyler Murray as well, especially a guy who started him in multiple leagues. It really sucked to see him put up virtually a goose egg. I mean, I feel like I was almost better off just leaving that spot open as opposed to rolling him out there. And it really, really sucks because last week we had brought up weather being a factor and how not many people kind of think to look for that whenever trying to put together a fantasy lineup.
Mm-hmm.
And then we both said, "Oh, Kyler Murray, start him, sure." And then the weather ends up being a legitimate problem for Kyler Murray and the rest of the Cardinals. Passing offense, just absolute nuts. My dud for the week for the running back position, Melvin Gordon, 2 fumbles inside of the 5-yard line.
Yep. Yikes.
What'd you hold out for?
Break out the yikes video.
It's one of my favorite videos. Yeah, big yikes. I don't know what you held out for if you're going to come back and fumble twice. One of the times when the game's on the line. But I think he had 9 points. Yeah, finished with 9 points, so it didn't even hit double-digit scoring. Tight end position, Zach Ertz is actually going to be mine. 5 points. Yep, 5 points scored total. That's not what we drafted him for. His ADP was super-duper high coming into 2019. I really feel like, 1, Carson Wentz really doesn't like him, or 2, Dallas Goedert is starting to emerge himself as a name in that locker room.
Hey, listen, if Carson Wentz doesn't like him, trade him to Jacksonville. They could use a tight end.
For Nick Foles.
Yeah. No, because Nick Foles will he's going to tell Gardner, even if I'm not coming back, if you're the starter, that's the go-to guy.
Mm. Yeah, that's going
to be not even like fantasy related. Jacksonville's quarterback situation is going to be interesting to watch.
Yeah, because they gave Nick Foles all of that money, but yeah. I feel like you can't stop the Gardner train right now.
No. But it's always when you give a guy a big payday like that, if somebody comes in, and whether it be due to injury or whatever, and it's typically due to injury because you're not just taking a guy out you're paying that much money. It's interesting to see that the leash is typically so short. Like Gardner might have like a 3 interception game, and that would be it. Yep. But Okay. Anyway, moving on. Yeah, Zach Ertz has been very disappointing. I was like torn between Kittle and Ertz, and they were both there when I was picking, and I picked Kittle
For
in one of my fantasy drafts.
oh,
Yeah, they were both still there.
Yeah, good move.
Kelsey was the only tight end taken, and I took Kittle.
Yeah, good move.
My must starts for the week. This is kind of plays into our top five in a way. That if you have a guy as a must start, they're probably in your top five. I mean, otherwise it really wouldn't make any sense, right? So, my top player at each position, my must start guys: Deshaun Watson at quarterback going against Oakland, Dalvin Cook going against Washington, Tyler Lockett playing against Atlanta, and Austin Hooper going against Seattle.
So we got some similar guys, and like you said, mine kind of plays into my top five as well. So can't miss. I got Russell Wilson rebounding and having a huge game against the Atlanta Falcons. I have Leonard Fournette having a huge game against the New York Football Jets. I have Tyler Lockett also having another phenomenal game against the Atlanta Falcons, and then I have Evan Ingram bouncing back for a pretty decent game against the Detroit Lions.
Yeah. What's weird is I was looking at the running back projections, and I think Leonard Fournette was definitely in the top 10, but I expected to see him higher. As you mentioned, going against the Jets, C.J. Mosley has a groin injury, which he's now playing through. He missed some time, but he's not playing through. If you saw in that first Sony Michel touchdown, that dude is not anywhere near 100%.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even know if he's at 75%. He has no burst, and that is a guy that you need in order to limit Leonard Fournette. So, yeah, Leonard Fournette was like right on the cusp for me. If I were doing it, I'd probably say that he's an RB6. Like if we were doing like a top 7, top 10 or something like that. But yeah, definitely going against the Jets with that defense and having C.J. Mosley at maybe 60%. He's definitely in for a field day. And as you mentioned, they're letting him catch the ball more too. No T.J. Yeldon, he's in Buffalo now, so they're letting Leonard Fournette take over some of those duties.
He's catching like 3 or 4 passes a game. It's nuts.
Okay, and then as I mentioned, we're going to break out a new segment for you guys. So I texted Donnie literally this morning with this idea. So we'll see how it goes. Let us know how you feel about it. Maybe this can be like a weekly thing as well that we throw in. It's called Over Under, which is obviously something that a lot of people do. But we're literally just picking one guy, any position, one from each position, can be any player. It doesn't matter if it's like a guy that you expect to be at the top of the list or whatever. So Donnie, Kyler Murray, over or under 55 yards rushing against New Orleans?
Man. I want to say under, just because I don't feel like he's had that prominent rushing ability added to his arsenal quite yet. I still feel like Cliff Kingsbury is wanting to contain him to the pocket and kind of force him to become a better pocket passer. Well, he certainly can, become I don't want to say like a Michael Vick-esque runner, but, definitely a mobile quarterback who can get yards with his feet. Like you had mentioned last week, he'd easily get 4 or 5 fantasy points alone. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to go say under.
Through me. 1 second. That was random.
Hello.
Yeah, that was totally random.
Can you hear me? Yeah. Where did I cut off at?
I mean, no, your audio is still going through here. So
Gotcha.
So that's fine, but we were talking about Kyler Murray over under 55 yards. You said under. As you mentioned, really hasn't had like a game where he's really incorporated like that option where you see him take off and go for a long run or anything like that. I'm actually curious on something, so give me 1 second to look something up. So if I go to his player stats, Kyler Murray. So Kyler Murray rushing, he had in the opener 13 yards rushing, 4 yards rushing, 69 yards rushing, nice. 27 yards rushing, 93, 32, 28. So that over 55, he's done it twice. Under, he's done it 5 times. So
interesting, for sure. Do you want to keep going, or do you want me to go for quarterback?
I say we go position by position, so you give me yours.
Do it, yeah, okay. So over, under, Josh Allen, 200 passing yards this week.
200 passing yards for Josh Allen. and they play the Eagles, right?
Yeah.
But
Yep.
and it's in Buffalo.
It is, yeah.
So he threw for just over 200 yards against the Dolphins. So
Yep.
I'm going to say under. I'm going to
Gotcha.
say
Yeah,
he has between 175, 185.
yeah, I would also agree. The reason why I say 200 is because in all but one game this year, he has thrown for over 200 yards, which I definitely would not have guessed whenever trying to decide on that. The one game he didn't was the New England Patriots, where he put up 153. So you can kind of expect the same stat line to sound a little bit better going up against the Eagles this week.
Yeah. And he's also, so every game that he's thrown for over 200, he's thrown for, he's had about 30 attempts, right? So he had 26 last week, and he topped 200 yards. Again, that was against Miami, though. So you look at the other games, 254, his season high in the opener, he threw 37 times. So I don't expect that he's always going to keep going, that he's going to continue to throw over, like, right around 30 attempts, which is why I'll say under 200. I think the Buffalo's probably at their best if he's throwing the ball, like, 22 to 25 times. Maybe less than that.
I'd say that, yeah, I feel like the Bills have done a really good job using his athleticism as well. So he's definitely making plays with his feet. If it's not physically running the ball, it's, moving him around in the pocket and extending the play.
Right. Okay, running back position. Dalvin Cook over or under 1.5 touchdowns.
Oh, man. I know he had the pair of touchdowns last week. Thursday Night Football versus the Redskins. Without Adam Thielen, I'll go over. I'll go over. I say he gets one receiving and one rushing.
Another multi-touchdown performance. As you mentioned, there's already some people throwing his name around in the MVP consideration. Another multi-touchdown game. How do you not keep talking about the guy?
Right, yeah, and obviously you don't expect multi-touchdown games to extend throughout the entire season, but he's definitely on a roll right now. So, sure. All right, Todd Gurley over under 60 rushing yards.
60. Dang it! I thought you were going to say like 80, and I was going to say under 60. Against the Bengals, that's like as good of a matchup as you're going to have, even though Todd Gurley has not been super productive. And they keep talking about Darrell Henderson, but it's like, are we actually going to see it, or are they just going to talk about it?
Right, yeah, Henderson's been kind of floating around a little bit. I'll give you a hint on why I chose this. He hasn't eclipsed 60 rushing yards since week 2.
Yeah, and see, this is but I just think that they get up so early that they're gonna try to, well, not try to, but they're gonna get away from the pass because of it. I'm gonna say over. Maybe it's a little bit bold for me to say that based off what you're saying, but that matchup, I think that the Rams go up early, probably due to the passing game, and then it's Todd Gurley on the ground.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with you. I think if he can kind of right the ship in terms of getting over 60 yards, I feel like it can be against this Bengals defense. My only worry is if they do get up early, do they risk playing Todd Gurley? Do they want to keep his snap count to a minimum? Would they rather hand the ball off to a guy like Darrell Henderson or is Malcolm Brown hurt? I haven't heard a lot of Malcolm Brown.
Oh, I don't know if he's hurt. I know that the game that he started, he only had like 40 yards.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I mean, that's definitely a good point as well. Do they manage him, and maybe it is finally time that we see, and they walk the walk instead of talking the talk with Henderson getting more involved. But I don't, that matchup, I gotta say over 60.
I gotta agree. I'm not like pounding the table for him to get over 60, but if you maybe put money on what week for him to get over 60 through the entire year, I feel like this would be it.
Yeah. Okay, so a guy that we both obviously love, we've talked about him a ton, Tyler Lockett playing against Atlanta, over under 100 receiving yards.
That's tough because what we just talked about with Gurley can also be, that same logic can be applied to Tyler Lockett. Do they get up to a significant lead and then to start to, decide to start running the ball? Man, I can't talk today. I'll go over. I feel like Tyler Lockett, I pegged him as a top 5 receiver this week. I pegged him as a must start this week. I feel like at minimum he'll have about 100 yards and probably a touchdown as well.
Okay. So if he were to have 100 yards, that would actually be his second highest total. He had 154 on 11 receptions against New Orleans. Other than that, he hasn't caught more than 5 passes, other than one other time, which was against the Steelers. 10 receptions, 79 yards. Other than that, it's been one catch in the opener, 4, 4, 5, 5. So, yeah, 100 yards would be his second highest total. But at the same time, I'm with you. I think going against an Atlanta defense that is amongst the worst in the league right now, and maybe even worse by the time they play on Sunday, being Russell Wilson's primary option. I'm not going to lie, I feel like Russell Wilson's probably a little pissed off after that game against the Ravens, trying to get his name back to the top of the MVP candidacy. I think he has a monster game, and, without Will Dissly there for obviously this week and the rest of the season, Tyler Lockett's like the primary option, not that he wasn't already, but even in the red zone now, where Will Dissly might have been like the guy in the red zone, you don't have that anymore, so it's going to be either Tyler Lockett or DK Metcalf, one of those guys. I'm going to say over 100 yards as well, and I think he scores another touchdown to boot.
Yeah, that's tough for sure. And, whenever you bring up the fact that he's got about like 4 or 5 passes per week, you're kind of banking on a big play from Lockett. If he's going to get 100 yards, he's probably going to have to average about 20 yards per catch, which I'm sure sounds ridiculous, but probably watching him play football, probably not. But, regardless, I think Lockett has a big day. So, and that was a good one.
You mentioned
like
the big play factor. The week one, he only caught one pass. It was a 44-yard touchdown. So.
Interesting. Damn, there you go. My receiver, Odell Beckham Jr., over under 6 catches this week against the New England Patriots.
Oh, New England. 6 catches. Okay. Has New England allowed anybody to catch 6 passes against them? This is tough, man. Like, New England's defense is the best in the league right now, and it's not even close, what they're doing to offenses. At the same time, you could argue that might be beneficial for him. Maybe he's not getting the big play, but maybe the volume's there, keeping it underneath. So on the season, he has 29 receptions.
Yep. So if it helps you at all, there has been only 2 games where he hasn't gotten 6 or more receptions, but those have came the last 2 or 3 weeks. Once against Baltimore, once against San Francisco. If it helps, he's coming off of a bye, but he'll be on the road playing the Patriots. And like you said, it's really good probability that Stephon Gilmore gets paired up against him on Sunday.
Yeah, see, I would argue that Jarvis Landry would be a better bet for 6+ catches because of that. I'm going to say under.
Yeah, I have to go under as well.
Stephon Gilmore is the best in the league right now. He's been, over the last 2 seasons, the best cornerback in the league. I know a lot of people like the flash of Jalen Ramsey and everything like that, but since Stephon Gilmore's been in New England, he's been on a different level than he was in Buffalo.
Completely agree.
Okay, so last, the tight end position. George Kittle, over or under 10 receptions?
That's a lot.
Against Carolina.
That's a lot. I don't know. It's always a stretch to say anybody gets 10 receptions regardless of who they are or what position they play. I have to go under.
Okay. Yeah, I want a little, I would say bold with the number, not the player. So Kittle's season high is 8, and he's done that twice. He's had 6 twice, and he's also had 3 twice. Last week, I feel like you can kind of throw away because everybody saw the monsoon they were playing in. But once again, 10 receptions in an offense, like we mentioned, that doesn't throw the ball that often, as a matter of fact, the least in the league, that's a very high number. And they're going to have a new face there as well in Emmanuel Sanders that might take a reception or 2 or 3 or 4 away. So I would agree with the under. I want a little bold here saying, is he going to have essentially his best game of the season this week?
Yeah, that's super bold, but, to counter our logic, what if Emmanuel Sanders helps draw attention away from George Kittle? With him being the only passing option in San Francisco, maybe this might help Kittle's numbers. So, we'll see. 10 catches is a little bit high for me, but, obviously my opinion is shoddy at best on this podcast. So. Sure. All right, last one. Darren Waller, over or under 7 catches on the year? So not on the year, on the week.
Over.
Over. Pound the over.
So if they're playing against the Texans, I don't know what the plan is there as far as how they're going to cover him. Will it be a linebacker or will it be like a Justin Reed in the secondary? Okay, Darren Waller. On the season, he has 44 receptions.
Yep.
He does have 7 plus in 4 of their games. I'm gonna say over, and the reason is I think the Texans get up early, and the Raiders go pass heavy. I'm not sure what the status is on Tyrell Williams. I know he's banged up. Excuse me. But Darren Waller, regardless, has been the top pass catcher there. If you look at what he did like last week, 7 receptions, 126 yards, 2 touchdowns against Green Bay, and Green Bay is a better defense than Houston. So, not saying he's gonna replicate that game, but as far as the volume, I would think that he could get up there 7 plus catches.
Yeah, so I was actually going to see if you think he would break a trend. I noticed. So about every 3 weeks, it looks like Waller will catch 7 passes, whether it be 13 or exact 7. Because week 1, 7, week 4, 7, and week 7, 7. 7, 7, 7. So I was just trying to see if he could potentially break a trend. That we see, but it's definitely a good one. Anytime your tight end can go out, and I think you said he had a 13 catch game, which is ridiculous for a tight end, let alone a pass catcher in the league. So definitely interesting. He's by far the best pass catcher they have in Oakland, and obviously Derek Carr trusts him.
Yeah, and that 13 catch game came against with Tyrell Williams in the lineup. So once again, I'm not sure if he's gonna what his status is as far as Sunday, but either way. Houston is favored by 6.5 points of the game. It's in Houston, so I would expect Houston to be up for most of that game, the Raiders to be playing catch-up and throwing the ball, and Darren Waller to be a big beneficiary of that game script. Yeah, and that pretty much wraps everything up. So I'd say one of the better shows on Around the 412 Fantasy Football. I love this over-under segment. When it came to my mind, I was like, I want to do this.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
I hope he agrees.
I would never disagree.
It might be something that you guys see every week. Once again, let us know how you feel about it. Tweet at us, whether it be my handle at Z23Smitty, at Donnie Druin, or at Around the 412. You can get in touch with us anyway. Hey, if you wanna start a DM with us like our boy Tyler and just get fantasy football advice from us that way, we're here. We're here to help you guys out. So halfway through the season, I wish you guys the best of luck this week. Remember, Rocking Around the 412 Year 2 is well underway. Get at us. Our pinned tweet on Twitter will give you all the information. Any donation can help. Please retweet, share it in any way that you guys can. If you're feeling generous enough to donate, there's going to be a ton of great prizes available to people, as you'll see on the pinned tweet. All the information is there. Jerseys, tickets, merchandise, gift cards, etc. So, really awesome stuff. And this show that is part of the Pod Hub Network is sponsored by Keats Barbershop, located at 180 Brighton Avenue in Rochester, PA. Keats Barbershop is an old-fashioned barbershop owned and operated by my good buddy, Christian Circle. He served in the military, so every Tuesday he does $5 off for military, first responders, and nurses. We love the Army. Everybody remember that. Open 10 to 7 Tuesday through Friday and Saturday 9 to 4. So once again, Tuesday's the day to go. $5 off for military personnel, first responders, and nurses. No better way to give back, I don't think. And also, Christian is running a toy drive that starts November 1st and goes until December 20th. You take a toy or anything, an unopened one, that's going to be donated to kids, and you get $5 off your haircut. So, just some more good things going on in our community.
Man, what a guy.
Yeah.
What a town.
So anyway, get at us at Around the 412. If you're watching this on Twitch, thanks for watching. If you're listening to us on one of the various platforms we can be found on, whether it be Spotify, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spreaker, Stitcher, I don't even know where we all are, but wherever we're at, if you're listening to us, you can head on over to Twitch so you guys can join us live. We'll answer any questions that you guys might have about fantasy football or just life in general. Right, Tony?
Right. Nope. We're always we care.
We're here for you. We're here for you guys, whether it be for your fantasy lineups or just in life in general. So with that being said, it's been a blast doing week 8 for you guys. Thanks for listening. Come join us for week 9, and we'll talk to you then. Bye-bye.